My name is Garrett, and at 25 years old I never imagined my parents would betray me like this. For 3 years I paid for nearly everything, while living in their garage, forced out of my bedroom to make space for my brother and his pregnant girlfriend. I remember the shock when I came home to find my belongings dumped in that cold, cramped space. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs sooner. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors who turned pain into strength. Growing up in suburban Oregon, my relationship with my parents had always been solid. Mom worked as a part-time receptionist at a dental office while Dad held a steady position as a delivery driver. They were hard-working people who tried their best to provide for Jake and me, even when finances were tight. Our modest 3-bedroom house was always filled with warmth, despite our financial struggles. From an early age, I understood the value of work and responsibility, taking on paper routes as a teenager, and later working through college. After graduating with a computer science degree, I landed a job as a software developer at a growing tech company. The starting salary wasn't spectacular, but it was stable with good potential for growth. Many of my friends immediately moved out, renting apartments with roommates or studio spaces of their own. I had initially planned to do the same, but a conversation with my parents changed my trajectory. "Your father and I are so proud of you, Garrett," Mom said one evening about 3 years ago, "but we could really use some help with the mortgage. The interest rate went up, and with your father's back problems limiting his hours." Their request wasn't unreasonable. The recession had hit them hard, and they were still recovering financially. Dad had injured his back the previous year, reducing his income significantly. Their retirement savings had taken a hit, and medical bills were piling up. I agreed to stay home and contribute to household expenses while saving for my own place. Just for a year or two, I told myself, until they get back on their feet. We agreed I would pay 2/3 of the mortgage and utilities, plus buy most of the groceries. In return, I would have my childhood bedroom and the freedom to come and go as I pleased. The arrangement seemed fair, and initially it worked well. I was building my savings while helping the people who had raised me. My brother Jake was a different story altogether. 2 years younger than me, he had always been the family charmer. Where I was studious and methodical, Jake was spontaneous and charismatic. He could talk his way out of any trouble, and had mastered the art of minimum effort for maximum reward. After barely graduating high school, he bounced between retail jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. "Jake is just finding himself," Mom would say whenever I expressed frustration at his lack of direction. He lived at home too, but his financial contribution was minimal and inconsistent. $20 here, $30 there whenever he felt like it. Despite being 23, he spent most weekends partying with friends, coming home at odd hours and sleeping until noon. My parents rarely called him out on his behavior, seemingly afraid of pushing him away. "Your brother is just wired differently," Dad would explain. "Not everyone can be as focused as you, Garrett." These comments stung, but I brushed them aside. After all, I was the one building a career, the one with a plan. I took pride in being reliable and helping my family stay afloat. My goal was to save enough for a down payment on a small house, something that would appreciate in value over time. I was on track to reach that goal within 2 to 3 years if I maintained my strict budget. There were subtle signs of favoritism that I ignored. Mom would make Jake's favorite meals on weeknights, but would only make mine on special occasions. Dad would drop everything to help Jake with car problems, but would ask me to wait until the weekend if I needed assistance. Small things easily dismissed, yet forming a pattern I refused to acknowledge. Despite these minor irritations, life was stable. I had my private space to decompress after work. I was advancing in my career, receiving my first promotion within 10 months. My social life was limited but satisfying, with weekend outings with colleagues and the occasional date. I even started a small side project, developing an app that showed promise. The future looked bright, and I believed my sacrifice of living at home was temporary and worthwhile. "You are doing the right thing," my friend Marcus assured me when I expressed occasional doubts. "Building a financial foundation while helping your parents is admirable. Just make sure you eventually make the move to independence." I had no idea how prophetic his warning would become, or how quickly my comfortable arrangement would transform into a nightmare of exploitation and disrespect. The first tremor in our household harmony came on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening. Jake burst through the front door during dinner, an unusual grin spreading across his face. He rarely joined us for meals, so his presence alone signaled something significant. "I have big news," he announced, pulling out a chair and helping himself to the lasagna I had brought home. "Natalie is pregnant. You are looking at a future dad." My fork froze midway to my mouth. Natalie was his latest girlfriend, a petite blonde with a penchant for drama who worked as a barista. They had been dating for barely 4 months, and their relationship seemed as unstable as all his previous ones, marked by intense arguments, followed by passionate reconciliations. "Are you serious?" Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "I am going to be a grandmother." What followed was a scene of jubilation that left me bewildered. Dad jumped up to hug Jake. Mom was wiping tears of joy, and questions about due dates and gender reveals filled the air. No one asked the obvious questions. How would Jake support a child? Where would they live? Was this planned or an accident? Instead, this unplanned pregnancy from my chronically unemployed brother was being celebrated like he had announced a Nobel Prize win. "This is wonderful news, son," Dad said, clapping Jake on the shoulder. "Nothing more important than family." I offered congratulations too, though with more reservation. That night I lay awake thinking about how this might affect our household dynamics. I never imagined just how dramatically my life was about to change. 2 weeks later, I returned home from a particularly grueling workday. A system crash had kept me at the office until 8:30, and all I wanted was a shower and the comfort of my bed. When I unlocked the front door, unfamiliar shoes were scattered in the entryway, and the living room was filled with boxes. "Mom, Dad," I called out, navigating through the clutter. Mom appeared from the kitchen, an odd expression on her face, somewhere between guilt and defensiveness. "Garrett, we need to talk," she said, gesturing toward the dining table. Dad joined us, avoiding eye contact. "Jake and Natalie are moving in with us," Dad announced without preamble. "They need stability before the baby comes." "Okay," I said slowly, unsure why this required a formal discussion. Jake had essentially been living at home anyway, just disappearing for days at a time to stay at Natalie's shared apartment. "They can use the guest room, right?" The uncomfortable silence that followed sent a chill through me. "Actually," Mom continued, her voice unnaturally bright, "we think they need more space with the baby coming and all. They will need room for a crib and changing table." "So we gave them your room," Dad finished, finally meeting my eyes with a challenging stare. "We moved your things to the garage. We fixed it up for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. My room. The space I had maintained, the sanctuary I retreated to after long workdays supporting this household, given away without consultation. "You did what I asked," my voice barely audible. "It is already done," Mom said, patting my hand as if soothing a child. "Come see what we did with the garage. It is quite cozy." In a daze, I followed them through the kitchen and out the side door to our detached garage. Half of the space was still occupied by Dad's tools and storage boxes. The other half had been hastily converted into a makeshift bedroom. My bed was wedged against one wall, my dresser against another. A small desk supported my computer. A flimsy room divider provided the illusion of separation from the garage items. "We put in that space heater for winter," Dad said proudly, pointing to a small unit that looked woefully inadequate for the uninsulated space. "And we ran an extension cord for your electronics." I stood silently, taking in what they had done. The concrete floor was partially covered by an old area rug. There was no proper closet, just a metal rack for hanging clothes. The single window was small and covered with security bars, offering minimal natural light or ventilation. "Where is the bathroom?" I finally asked. "You will use the downstairs half bath," Mom explained, "and you can shower in the main bathroom when Jake and Natalie are not using it." My belongings had been packed haphazardly with little regard for organization or care. Books were stuffed in random boxes, framed photos piled in a corner, some with cracked glass. The disrespect was palpable. "You did this without asking me," I managed to say, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I pay most of the bills in this house." "It is only temporary," Mom insisted, though her eyes slid away from mine. just until they get on their feet. Family needs to stick together during important times like this. And you are not even here most of the day, Dad added. You are at work. They need the space more than you do. Before I could formulate a response, the sound of laughter drew our attention back to the house. Jake and Natalie were walking through the kitchen, arms full of shopping bags. They spotted us through the open garage door. "Oh hey," Jake called cheerfully. "Thanks for the room upgrade, bro. Natalie loves the extra closet space." Natalie offered a small wave, her free hand resting on her still flat stomach. "The nursery will look amazing once we paint. I am thinking mint green." They disappeared inside, leaving me standing in my new home, the reality of my situation sinking in with crushing weight. The space they referred to as a nursery had been mine just hours ago. The walls they planned to paint had surrounded me since childhood. "This is wrong," I said quietly. "Do not be selfish," Mom chided. "They are bringing a new life into this world. Your niece or nephew. Would you really put your comfort above their needs?" Put that way, any objection I raised would make me the villain. I swallowed my protests, nodded numbly, and watched my parents return to the house, satisfied that I had accepted their decision. Left alone in the cold garage, surrounded by carelessly packed remnants of my life, I experienced the first true betrayal from the people I trusted most. Life in the garage proved to be every bit as difficult as I feared. December in Oregon brought temperatures that dropped into the 30s at night, and the small space heater struggled against the drafty walls and concrete floor. I often woke shivering despite sleeping in sweatpants, thermal socks, and a hoodie. The extension cord they had provided was insufficient for my needs, frequently tripping the circuit breaker when I tried to use my computer and the heater simultaneously. Privacy became a luxury I could no longer afford. The thin walls of the converted space did little to muffle the sounds of tools being moved whenever Dad needed something from his workbench. The lock on the side door was flimsy, offering minimal security for my possessions. To use the bathroom, I had to enter the main house, sometimes awkwardly interrupting family moments in the living room or kitchen. But the physical discomfort paled in comparison to the financial burden that gradually increased. 1 month after the room reassignment, Jake lost his latest job at the electronics store. "They were totally unreasonable about shift coverage," he complained during dinner. "How was I supposed to know I needed to call 3 hours before my shift if I could not make it?" Dad nodded sympathetically. "Some managers just do not understand that life happens." 2 weeks later, Natalie announced she was quitting her barista position. "The doctor says the stress is not good for the baby," she explained, one hand protectively cradling her barely visible bump. "Plus all those coffee smells make me nauseous." With both Jake and Natalie unemployed, the household expenses shifted even more dramatically onto my shoulders. Grocery bills doubled as Natalie claimed to need specific organic foods for the baby's development. The utility costs spiked with 2 additional adults home all day using electricity, water, and heat that I primarily paid for. When the first quarter property tax bill arrived, Dad approached me in the garage as I was getting ready for work. "Garrett, we are going to need a little more help this month," he said, showing me the statement. "With Jake between jobs and the baby coming, we are stretched thin." How much, I asked, already mentally calculating what this would do to my savings plan. "We need another $500 on top of your usual contribution." I stared at him, doing quick math. "Dad, that would mean I am paying almost 70% of all household expenses." He shrugged, unmoved by this observation. "We all need to pull together right now. This is what family does." Reluctantly, I transferred the additional money, watching my carefully built savings begin to erode. What was initially presented as a temporary arrangement showed no signs of changing. Jake made token efforts to find employment, going to occasional interviews, but always finding reasons why the positions were unsuitable. "Retail is a dead end," he declared after rejecting a job offer from a home improvement store. "I need something with a future, you know." Meanwhile, Natalie made herself increasingly at home, rearranging kitchen cabinets to her liking and leaving her personal items scattered throughout common spaces. She developed a habit of using my premium shower products whenever I left them in the bathroom, claiming pregnancy brain made her forgetful about which items were hers. My attempts to establish boundaries were met with resistance and accusations. "Seriously, Garrett, it is just shampoo," Jake snapped when I mentioned the issue. "Do you really want my pregnant girlfriend using cheap stuff with chemicals?" Personal items began disappearing from my garage space. My wireless headphones vanished only to reappear weeks later in Jake's possession. "I thought you said I could borrow these," he insisted when confronted. "I never said that." "Well, pregnancy brain must be contagious because I could have sworn you did." The bathroom schedule became another point of contention. Despite agreeing that I would have access between 7 and 7:30 each morning before work, I frequently found Natalie occupying the shower during my allotted time. Morning sickness was her standard excuse, though it seemed suspiciously scheduled to coincide precisely with my bathroom time. After 3 months of garage living, I attempted to have a rational conversation about fairness and contribution. I chose a Sunday afternoon when everyone was home, laying out a reasonable proposal for shared responsibilities. "I understand supporting family is important." I began carefully, but I think we need to discuss a timeline for Jake and Natalie finding their own place, or at least contributing to household expenses. The reaction was immediate and hostile. "I cannot believe how selfish you are being," Mom said, her expression disappointed. "Your brother is preparing to become a father. Do you not care about your niece or nephew at all?" "We are trying our best," Natalie added, tears welling in her eyes on cue. "Do you think I wanted to get morning sickness to lose my job?" Jake slung an arm around her shoulders protectively. "Real family supports each other without keeping score, bro." "I am not keeping score," I protested. "I just think there should be some balance. I am living in a garage while paying for almost everything." "The garage that we own," Dad pointed out sharply, "on our property." The implication was clear. Despite my financial contributions, I had no real standing to negotiate. The conversation ended with me apologizing for upsetting everyone, especially Natalie in her delicate condition. As months passed, my resentment grew alongside my financial strain. My savings goal became increasingly distant as more emergency expenses arose. When the water heater failed, I covered the $2,000 replacement. When property insurance increased, I absorbed the difference. All while Jake and Natalie contributed nothing beyond occasional token gestures like buying a pizza or a gallon of milk. The breaking point came 9 months into this arrangement when I discovered the family was planning a weekend getaway to celebrate the imminent arrival of the baby. "We are thinking a nice cabin by the lake," Mom told me excitedly. "Just family to enjoy our last quiet weekend before the baby comes." "Sounds nice," I said. "When is it?" "Next weekend. We need your portion of the rental fee by Wednesday. It comes to $700. I blinked in surprise. "My portion, $700. That is most of the cost, is it not?" "Well, Jake and Natalie cannot contribute right now." "Obviously," she explained as if speaking to a child, "and your father and I are covering the food and activities." "Was I even included in the planning?" I asked. Mom looked uncomfortable. "Well, we assumed you would be busy with work. It is really more for the expectant parents anyway." The message could not have been clearer. My money was welcome, but my presence was an afterthought. That night alone in my cold garage, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what my friend Marcus had been telling me for months. I was not being treated like family. I was being used. Baby Sophia arrived in early summer, a tiny 6-pound bundle with Jake's nose and Natalie's blue eyes. The household revolved entirely around her arrival, with my parents transformed into doting grandparents who seemed to forget they had 2 sons, not just one. My bedroom, now officially converted into a nursery with mint green walls and woodland creature decals, became a shrine to their first grandchild. "Is it not amazing what Jake and Natalie have created?" Mom would say, cradling Sophia while giving tours of the nursery to visiting relatives. No one ever mentioned that the room had been mine just months before, or that I was now living in the garage while funding much of their comfortable family life. My living conditions deteriorated further after Sophia's birth. Sleep became a luxury as the baby's cries penetrated the thin garage walls at all hours. Natalie developed a habit of doing laundry at midnight, the washer and dryer located just on the other side of my makeshift wall, their rumbling and buzzing, making rest impossible. Babies run on their own schedule, she would say dismissively when I mentioned the noise. You try keeping a newborn on a convenient timetable. The financial burden grew heavier. Formula diapers and baby clothes were mysteriously added to the shopping list I was expected to fund. Doctor visits and unexpected baby expenses became my responsibility because family helps family. My credit card balance crept upward for the first time since college as my carefully managed finances buckled under the strain. 1 year into this arrangement, my life had become unrecognizable. The promising career path I had been on stalled as chronic sleep deprivation and stress affected my performance. My supervisor noticed the change. "You seem distracted lately, Garrett," she commented during my annual review. "The quality of your code has slipped, and you have missed 2 project deadlines. Is everything okay at home?" How could I explain that home was a drafty garage, where I slept on a twin bed between storage boxes and power tools, that I was essentially supporting 5 people on 1 salary, while being treated like an unwelcome tenant? I mumbled. Something about temporary family issues and promised to improve. My social life withered away entirely. Friends stopped inviting me out after I canceled too many times due to family obligations or financial constraints. Dating became impossible both logistically and emotionally. How could I bring someone back to a garage bedroom? How could I explain my living situation without sounding either pathetic or foolish? The isolation fed a growing depression. I found myself sitting in my car after work, dreading the return to a house where I was simultaneously essential and invisible. Some nights I would drive to a nearby park just to sit in silence and escape the chaos of home. The dynamics within the house grew increasingly toxic. Jake and Natalie operated as if they were the primary residents making decisions about communal spaces without consultation. The living room gradually filled with baby equipment, leaving little room for anyone else. The kitchen cabinets were reorganized to accommodate baby bottles and supplies, my few items pushed to inconvenient top shelves. When family decisions were made, I was rarely included in the discussion, despite being the primary financial contributor. Major purchases happened without my input, though the cost often fell to me. When the refrigerator needed replacement, Dad and Jake selected an expensive model with a built-in ice maker and water dispenser, then presented me with the bill as a fait accompli. "We knew you would want the best for the family," Dad said when I questioned the extravagance. Jake and Natalie's attitude toward me shifted from initial gratitude to entitled expectation. My financial support was taken for granted, treated as an obligation rather than a choice. If I hesitated or questioned any expense, I was portrayed as selfish and unfeeling. "Do you really want your niece drinking tap water?" Natalie would ask if I questioned the delivery of bottled water. There could be lead in the pipes. "Sophia needs these educational toys for proper development." Jake would insist when ordering expensive baby items online, "unless you want her to fall behind other kids." Every request came wrapped in guilt and emotional manipulation. Every refusal was met with accusations of not caring about family. The weight of being the responsible one crushed me a little more each day. The contrast between how my parents treated Jake and me became impossible to ignore. His parenting was praised effusively, despite his minimal involvement. His occasional dishwashing was treated as extraordinary effort deserving of recognition. Meanwhile, my daily contributions, financial and otherwise, were expected and unremarked upon. "Your brother has really matured since becoming a father," Mom commented one evening as Jake played video games while Natalie bathed the baby. "He has such a natural connection with Sophia." The unfairness burned, but I had learned that pointing it out only led to more conflict and guilt. Instead, I retreated further into myself, working longer hours to avoid coming home, saving what little I could in a separate account my family knew nothing about. My one source of support remained my coworker Marcus, who had become a close friend. Over lunch breaks, I would confide the latest household injustice, the newest financial demand. "This is not normal, Garrett," he told me repeatedly. "What they are doing is financial abuse. You are enabling a dysfunctional system." "They are my family," I would respond automatically. "What choice do I have?" "The choice to value yourself," he would say. "The choice to set boundaries. The choice to walk away if those boundaries are not respected." His words planted seeds that would take months to germinate. Could I really walk away from my family? Was I truly helping them by allowing this exploitation to continue, or was I merely postponing the inevitable collapse of an unsustainable situation? As the 1-year mark of garage living stretched into 18 months, then 2 years, I watched my dreams of homeownership fade into impossibility. My savings had been depleted, my career momentum stalled, my self-esteem eroded by constant messages that my needs were secondary to everyone else's. The family vacation planned without including me was particularly painful. Photos of my parents, Jake, Natalie, and Sophia, at a beachside resort filled our family group chat adventures I had helped fund, but was not invited to share. When they returned, sunburned and smiling, no one seemed to notice the absurdity of showing me vacation pictures from a trip I had partially financed, but was excluded from experiencing. Sophia loved the ocean, Mom gushed, scrolling through endless photos. She is such a water baby. I nodded and smiled, playing my assigned role of supportive uncle and financial provider, swallowing the hurt and resentment that threatened to choke me. That night, lying on my bed in the garage, listening to the distant sounds of my family watching a movie together in the living room, I finally acknowledged the truth that Marcus had been trying to help me see. This was not a temporary situation. This was not family supporting each other through difficult times. This was exploitation, plain and simple, and it would continue as long as I allowed it. After 2 years of living in the garage while financially supporting my brother's family, I decided it was time for a direct intervention. I spent weeks gathering financial records, creating spreadsheets, and outlining a reasonable plan for transitioning Jake and Natalie toward independence. I practiced what I would say, trying to frame everything in terms of what was best for Sophia's future stability. I chose a Sunday afternoon when Sophia was napping, asking everyone to gather in the living room for an important family discussion. I had even prepared handouts professionally printed and organized in folders. Thank you all for sitting down with me. I began handing out the folders. I wanted to talk about our living and financial arrangements. I have put together some information that I think will help us all. Dad immediately frowned at the spreadsheet, showing household expenses and contributions. Mom flipped nervously through the pages. Jake did not even open his folder, instead leaning back with arms crossed defensively. Natalie took one glance and slid her folder onto the coffee table. I have been supporting this household at unsustainable levels. I continued carefully. Currently, I am covering 78% of all expenses while living in a converted garage. This arrangement was presented as temporary, but we are now 2 years in with no plan for change. Are you saying we are not grateful? Mom interrupted, her voice tight. Because we appreciate everything you do, Garrett. This is not about gratitude, I clarified. It is about creating a sustainable situation for everyone, which is why I have created this 3-phase plan to help Jake and Natalie transition to financial independence. I directed them to the relevant page, which outlined a gradual 6-month process where they would incrementally take on more financial responsibility while I would continue providing decreasing support. Phase 1 involves both of you finding at least part-time employment, I explained. I have researched several options that would work around Sophia's schedule, including remote positions and jobs with flexible hours. So you want Natalie to abandon our daughter to strangers? Jake interjected, his tone confrontational. Not at all. There are many childcare options that are affordable and high quality. I have included information on 3 centers near us with excellent ratings. Daycare centers are breeding grounds for illness, Natalie objected. Sophia would be sick constantly. Studies actually show that early socialization strengthens the immune system, I countered. But more importantly, this plan would allow you both to start building careers and financial independence, which is better for Sophia long term. I cannot believe you are trying to dictate how we raise our child, Jake said, his voice rising. Since when are you the parenting expert? You do not even have kids. Dad raised a hand to quiet Jake. Garrett, while I appreciate the effort you put into this, you have to understand that Jake and Natalie have a child to raise. That is their primary responsibility right now. I understand that I said frustration building, but parenthood does not absolve people of financial responsibility. Most parents work and raise children simultaneously. We are not most parents, Natalie declared. We believe Sophia needs full-time parental attention during these formative years. Then perhaps you should be the ones financing that choice, I suggested, trying to keep my voice level. Right now, I am effectively subsidizing your parenting philosophy while living in a garage. Jake stood up suddenly. This is such bull. You think because you have some corporate job you can come in here and tell us how to live. Not everyone measures success by a paycheck, bro. Some of us value family over money. The implication that I did not value family stung deeply. This is not about money versus family. It is about fairness and respect. I have put my life on hold for 2 years to support all of you. No one asked you to do that, Jake shouted. You offered to help the family out, and now you are throwing it in our faces like we owe you something. You do owe me something, I responded, my careful composure finally cracking. You owe me basic respect and consideration. You owe me acknowledgement of the sacrifices I have made. And yes, you owe me a plan for how this situation changes going forward. Natalie began to cry right on cue. I cannot believe you are attacking us like this. We are just trying to do what is best for our daughter. Mom immediately moved to comfort her. It is okay, sweetheart. Garrett does not understand the pressures of parenthood. This is not about parenthood, I insisted. This is about basic fairness. I am living in a garage while paying for most of the household expenses. How is that reasonable? Dad stood up, his expression stern. That is enough, Garrett. I will not have you upsetting Natalie in her condition. Her condition, I asked, confused. What condition? A moment of awkward silence followed before Natalie placed a protective hand over her stomach. We were going to announce it this weekend. I am pregnant again. The news hit me like a physical blow. Another child, more expenses, more justifications for Jake and Natalie to avoid responsibility, more reasons why my needs would be secondary to everyone else's. Congratulations, I managed to say, though the word tasted bitter. But this actually makes my point more urgent. How do you plan to support 2 children? The same way we support one, Jake replied smugly. As a family. You mean with my money, I clarified. See, this is why Jake will always be more family-oriented than you, Dad said, the casual cruelty of his words striking deep. He understands that family is about supporting each other, not keeping ledgers and demanding payback. I looked around the room at the faces of people I had sacrificed so much for, and saw nothing but entitlement and dismissal. My carefully prepared intervention had failed completely. Not only had they rejected my reasonable proposal, but they had somehow transformed me into the villain of the story for even suggesting it. I think we are done here, I said, quietly gathering my unused presentation materials. No one disagreed or tried to continue the conversation as I walked out to my garage home, the weight of futility pressing down on me. Later that evening, I called Marcus and recounted the disastrous meeting. They are never going to change, are they? I asked, the realization both painful and liberating. No, he said gently, because they do not have to. You have created a situation where their behavior has no consequences. They have no incentive to change as long as you continue enabling them. So what do I do? You know what you need to do, Garrett. You just have not been ready to admit it to yourself. He was right. The path forward was becoming increasingly clear, though I still struggled to accept it. Walking away from family seemed unthinkable, a betrayal of everything I had been raised to believe about loyalty and obligation. But staying was slowly destroying me, financially, emotionally, and psychologically. That night I made a list of everything I had sacrificed over the past 2 years, my savings, my career advancement, my social life, my independence, my self-respect. Then I made a second list of what I had received in return, a cold garage to sleep in, constant guilt trips, and the privilege of funding a lifestyle I was not permitted to share. The imbalance was stark and undeniable, and with a second child on the way, the situation would only worsen. It was time to start planning my exit quietly and carefully before I lost everything, including myself. As Jake and Natalie's second pregnancy progressed, the dynamic in the house shifted yet again, this time with an even greater sense of entitlement. 3 years had now passed since I had been relocated to the garage. 3 years of paying the majority of household expenses while being treated as an afterthought in family decisions. The announcement of the second pregnancy brought with it new expectations and demands. One evening, Mom and Dad asked me to join them at the dining table, while Jake and Natalie were out shopping for baby items, presumably on my dime. "We need to discuss living arrangements." Dad began, his tone falsely casual. "With another baby coming, Jake and Natalie will need more space." I looked between them, a sense of dread building. "What are you suggesting?" Mom reached across to pat my hand. "We have been thinking that the basement might be a better space for you. We could clear out the storage area and set up your bed down there." I stared at them, momentarily speechless. The basement was a damp, windowless space with exposed pipes and occasional flooding during heavy rains. It was currently used for storage, precisely because it was unsuitable for habitation. "You want me to move from the garage to the basement," I clarified, certain I must have misunderstood. "Jake thought it might work well," Dad continued. "That way they could use the garage as a play area for Sophia and the new baby. Kids need space to run around, especially during winter months." The casual way they discussed downgrading my already substandard living conditions while expecting me to continue financing the household struck me as surreal. 3 years of sacrifice had not earned me even the most basic consideration. "Have either of you been in the basement recently?" I asked. "It has mold issues, and the ceiling is too low for me to stand upright in some areas." "We would clean it up, of course," Mom assured me, missing the point entirely. "Maybe put down some carpet remnants." I shook my head, finally reaching my limit. I am not moving to the basement. If anything, after 3 years of paying most of the bills, I should be moving back into an actual bedroom in the house. Their expressions shifted from expectant to affronted, as if my refusal was both unexpected and unreasonable. "Garrett, you need to think about what is best for the children," Mom chided. "They are the future of this family." "And what about my future?" I asked quietly. "Does that matter to either of you at all?" An uncomfortable silence followed, providing all the answer I needed. In that moment, a decision crystallized within me, a clarity I had been avoiding for too long. I would not be moving to the basement. I would be moving out entirely, cutting the financial umbilical cord that had allowed this dysfunctional situation to persist. Before I could verbalize this resolution, however, another discovery pushed me firmly over the edge. While searching for an important tax document in Dad's home office, I came across loan paperwork I had never seen before. My parents had taken out a second mortgage on the house, 6 months earlier, borrowing against their equity to provide Jake with startup capital for an online business venture he had never even mentioned to me. The business, according to the sparse documentation, involved reselling trendy sneakers online, a market Jake claimed to understand but had no actual experience in. The loan amount was substantial, $30,000, with the house I was helping pay for offered as collateral. The venture had apparently failed within 3 months, the money gone with nothing to show for it. That evening, I confronted my parents about the hidden loan. Their response was defensive and dismissive. "Jake needed a chance to build something for his family," Dad explained. "Not everyone can walk into a cushy tech job like you did." "Cushy," I repeated incredulously. "I worked through college and earned my degree while Jake was partying. I started at entry level and worked my way up. And now, I am financing this entire household while living in a garage." "Here we go with the scorekeeping again," Mom sighed. "Real family does not keep track of who pays what." "Except you do keep score," I pointed out. "You constantly remind me of my obligations to this family while never holding Jake to any standard at all. And now you have put the house at risk without even consulting me, despite the fact that I pay most of the mortgage." "It is still our house," Dad stated firmly. "You live here rent-free." The statement was so divorced from reality that I actually laughed. Rent-free, I pay over $2,000 monthly toward the mortgage and utilities. I buy most of the groceries. I paid for the new water heater, the refrigerator, and countless other expenses. In what universe is that rent-free? "Well, if you are so unhappy with the arrangement, maybe you should find your own place," Mom suggested clearly, not expecting me to agree. "You know what? You are absolutely right. I should." Their expressions changed from defensive to alarmed, as they realized I was serious. "Now, Garrett, do not be hasty," Dad backpedaled. We can discuss the basement situation further. This is not about the basement, I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve. This is about 3 years of being taken advantage of, while being made to feel selfish for having basic needs and expectations. I am done. I walked away from that conversation with a weight lifted from my shoulders. The decision had been made. Now I needed to execute it carefully and completely. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly put my plan into action. I secured a 1-bedroom apartment across town, signing the lease during my lunch break. I opened a new bank account at a different financial institution and began transferring my funds. I created a detailed inventory of my possessions to ensure nothing would be accidentally claimed by Jake or Natalie. I arranged for a moving truck for the following Saturday, scheduling it during a time when I knew everyone would be home. This was not going to be a quiet exit. It needed to be clear and unambiguous. When the truck pulled up outside our house that Saturday morning, the family was gathered in the living room. Sophia was playing with blocks on the floor, Jake and Natalie were discussing baby names, and my parents were offering suggestions. The domestic scene might have appeared wholesome to an outsider, unaware of the dysfunction beneath the surface. "What is that truck doing here?" Dad asked, as I walked through with an empty box. "I am moving out," I replied simply. "Today." The announcement created immediate chaos. Mom began to cry. Dad demanded explanations. Jake looked stunned, and Natalie quickly gathered Sophia as if my departure might somehow harm her. "You cannot just leave," Mom protested. "What about the mortgage payment due next week? What about the property taxes coming up?" The fact that her first concern was financial rather than emotional spoke volumes. "I have paid my last contribution to this household," I stated calmly. "From now on, the 4 adults living here will need to figure out how to support yourselves." "This is about the basement, is it not?" Dad asked. "We can work something else out. Maybe convert the dining room for you instead." "This is not about where I sleep," I explained. "This is about being valued and respected as a member of this family, which I have not been for a very long time." Jake finally found his voice. "So you are just going to abandon your family when we need you most, with a baby on the way?" "I am not abandoning anyone. I am choosing to stop enabling a situation that is unhealthy for everyone, including Sophia and your unborn child. Children need to see adults modeling responsibility and mutual respect, not exploitation and entitlement." "We never exploited you," Mom insisted. "We gave you a place to live." "In the garage," I reminded her, "while I paid most of the bills. That is the definition of exploitation." As the movers began loading my furniture and boxes, the reality of the situation finally seemed to dawn on my family. Without my financial contribution, their comfortable lifestyle would immediately become unsustainable. The panic in their expressions confirmed what I had suspected. They had never prepared for this possibility, never developed a contingency plan for life without my support. "You cannot do this to us," Dad said, his anger barely contained. "After everything we have done for you." "What exactly have you done for me these past 3 years?" I asked quietly. "Besides, take advantage of my sense of obligation and make me feel selfish for having basic needs." He had no answer. As the last of my possessions were loaded onto the truck, I handed my parents an envelope containing information. They would need the date of my final contribution to household expenses, the account numbers for utilities I would no longer be paying, and the name of the affordable financial counselor I had researched for them. "I am not doing this to hurt you," I told them sincerely. "I am doing this because it is necessary for me and ultimately for all of you. Jake and Natalie need to learn financial independence. You need to establish realistic expectations about retirement. And I need to start living my own life." I knelt down to say goodbye to Sophia, who at 2.5 years old probably would not remember me as the uncle who had sacrificed so much for her comfort. "Be good, kiddo. I will see you soon." As I walked toward my car, Jake followed me out. "You will regret this," he said, his voice shaking with anger and perhaps fear. "When you need family someday, remember this moment." I turned to face him one last time. "I have needed family for the past 3 years, Jake. I needed respect, consideration, and reciprocity. I never received any of those things. that is what I will remember." With those words, I drove away from the house that had become a prison of obligation toward a future that, while uncertain, was finally my own to shape. The first night in my new apartment was surreal. The space was modest, a one-bedroom unit in a quiet complex with covered parking and a small balcony. Nothing luxurious, but entirely mine. I sat on my bed, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and listened to the unfamiliar silence. No Sophia crying, no Jake, and Natalie arguing, no parents making decisions about my life without consulting me. Just peace, beautiful and unfamiliar. My phone had been buzzing constantly since my departure, messages ranging from Mom's tearful pleas to Dad's angry demands to Jake's alternating threats and guilt trips. I silenced the notifications, needing space to process the magnitude of the change I had initiated. The financial implications were significant. My monthly expenses were now considerably lower without supporting 5 people. But I had depleted much of my savings over the past 3 years. My retirement contributions had been minimal, and my career advancement had stalled. I was essentially starting over at 28, far behind where I should have been. Yet despite these challenges, I felt lighter than I had in years. The freedom to make my own decisions, to prioritize my own needs without guilt, was worth every penny of financial setback. The fallout from my departure was swift and predictable. 3 days after I moved out, Mom called in tears. "The mortgage payment is due tomorrow," she sobbed. "We do not have enough to cover it." "I am sorry to hear that," I responded calmly. "You might want to call the bank and discuss payment options." "But you always handle this," she protested. "We are counting on you." "Not anymore," I said gently but firmly. "This is exactly the kind of dependency I cannot support any longer." Similar calls followed about utility bills, grocery money, and unexpected expenses. Each time I maintained the same boundary, I would no longer be the financial solution to their problems. 2 weeks after my departure, Dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. His expression was a mixture of anger and desperation. "This has gone on long enough," he declared when I opened the door. "Your mother is beside herself with worry. Jake and Natalie cannot make ends meet. You need to come back and fulfill your responsibilities to this family." I invited him in, offered him coffee, and calmly explained that I would not be returning. "My responsibility to myself has to come first now," I told him. "For years I neglected my own needs to meet everyone else's. That period of my life is over." "So that is it. You just abandon your family when things get tough," he demanded. "I supported this family financially for 3 years while living in a garage," I reminded him. "I did not leave when things got tough. I left when I realized the situation was never going to change unless I forced it to." He left angry and disappointed, unable to see beyond his perception of me as selfish and uncaring. It would take months before any member of my family began to understand the legitimacy of my position. In the meantime, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion within 4 months of my move. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, gradually expanding my social circle beyond just Marcus, who remained a steadfast supporter. I started dating again tentatively, at first then with growing confidence, as I reclaimed my sense of self-worth. I also began seeing a therapist, working through the complex emotions surrounding my family situation. The guilt that had been my constant companion for years slowly began to dissolve as I gained perspective on the dysfunctional dynamics I had escaped. "What you experienced was a form of financial abuse," my therapist explained during one session. "Your family systematically exploited your sense of obligation while disregarding your needs. Walking away was not only reasonable but necessary for your well-being." 6 months after my departure, I received a text from Jake that surprised me. "Can we talk? Just the 2 of us." We met at a coffee shop near my apartment. Jake looked different, somehow older and more subdued. The trademark cockiness had diminished, replaced by something approaching humility. "Things have been hard since you left," he admitted, after awkward small talk. "Dad had to come out of retirement to work part-time. Mom is looking for jobs too. Natalie and I both had to find work, and daycare costs are killing us." "That sounds challenging," I acknowledged, neither gloating nor apologizing. I did not understand before he continued, staring into his coffee. "How much you were carrying for all of us. It was easier not to see it, to believe we deserved your help without giving anything back. It was the closest thing to an apology I expected to receive, and I accepted it as such. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "What we should have done years ago. Grow up. Take responsibility. Natalie and I are looking for our own place, something we can actually afford. We both have entry-level jobs. Nothing great, but it is a start." Our relationship began to heal slowly after that conversation, not back to what it had been, but towards something potentially healthier based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. My parents took longer to come around. Dad maintained his position that I had betrayed the family by prioritizing myself. Mom wavered between guilt trips and tentative acknowledgments that perhaps the situation had been unfair to me. I maintained firm boundaries with both of them, limiting contact and refusing to be drawn into financial discussions. A year after moving out, I invited them to my apartment for dinner, a neutral meeting on my terms. They came still uncomfortable with our new dynamic, but making an effort. The conversation was strained but civil. When Mom commented on how nice my place was, I detected a note of genuine happiness for me beneath her wistfulness. "You seem different," Dad observed as they were leaving. "More confident." I agreed. "Taking care of myself has allowed me to become the person I was meant to be, instead of just the family ATM." He winced at the characterization but did not dispute it. The journey toward healthy relationships with my family continues, with progress and setbacks along the way. I maintain clear boundaries about money, refusing to slip back into the role of financial savior. Sometimes this creates tension, but I no longer feel guilty for protecting myself. The most profound lesson I learned from this experience was that genuine love requires respect and reciprocity. Supporting others should not come at the cost of your own well-being. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who have become dependent on you, is to step back and allow natural consequences to occur. I also learned that taking care of yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Like the airline safety demonstration says, you must secure your own oxygen mask before helping others. By depleting myself to support my family's dysfunction, I was not helping any of us grow or thrive. Today, 3 years after walking away, my life is unrecognizable from before. I have been promoted twice at work. I have a healthy savings account again, and am back on track with retirement planning. I recently put a down payment on a small townhouse, achieving the goal that had been derailed by years of financial exploitation. My relationship with my family has evolved into something more balanced, though not without ongoing challenges. Jake and Natalie now live in their own apartment with their 2 children. They struggle financially but are learning to manage independently. My parents had to downsize to a smaller home but have adjusted to their new reality. We gather occasionally for family events, and I enjoy being Uncle Garrett to Sophia and her brother without the weight of resentment that once colored every interaction. I contribute to birthday and Christmas gifts, but my financial involvement stops there, a boundary that everyone now understands and respects. Walking away was the hardest decision I ever made, but also the most necessary. It allowed me to reclaim my life, and ironically made it possible for genuine family relationships to eventually develop, not based on obligation or exploitation, but on mutual respect and care. If you find yourself in a similar situation, trapped in a cycle of giving that depletes you while being taken for granted, know that setting boundaries is not selfish, it is essential. True love does not demand self-sacrifice to the point of self-destruction. Sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is walk away. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to prioritize their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve to be valued not just for what you provide, but for who you are.